Hey everybody, my name's Josh, and today we're going to talk about a day one schwazz, why we schwazz, the environments behind the schwazz, the supplies needed for a schwazz, and just all the ins and outs of it. First of all, what is a schwazz? A schwazz is where we take all the large fan leaves off of the plant at certain points throughout the flowering cycle. Today we're just going to focus on day one. Why do we schwazz? There's three main reasons for it, and we'll start at the top here. Optimum light penetration. Secondly, refocus the plant's energy. And third, oxygen and CO2 exchange. Those are going to be our main staples for a schwazz. To recap, optimum light penetration. When you remove those fan leaves, you can actually see, put your hand below the plant and you can see the light hitting it because nothing's shading it. All right, so secondly, you have the ability to refocus the plant's energy where it matters most. When you take all those leaves off, you really focus on the plant to push out flowers. That is what we're doing, obviously, because we're going into the flowering stage and it's day one of flowering. And third, and most importantly, it allows for oxygen and CO2 exchange to flow freely throughout the entire plant. Those large leaves are not anywhere to slow it down, and you can imagine airflow just kicks up to an all-time high after a day one schwazz. What we'll also talk about here is pros and cons. There's not that many cons when it comes to schwazz and why to schwazz, especially if you follow all the directions and the steps required. The pros can truly be unlimited, but we're gonna focus on the largest one. Large nugs throughout the entire plant. As we all know, that below a canopy, when you harvest a plant, can a lot of times have small larvae nugs, and we don't want those. We want large, complete, composed nugs throughout the entire plant. Schwazzing will allow you to achieve this. Secondly, it will minimize the pest homes. As you can imagine as well, a large fan leaf has a bunch of room underneath of it for pests and other things to hang out that you don't want in your flower room at all. By removing all these fan leaves, it gives your plant a fresh start at hopefully not having any of these pests around. And thirdly, the most amount of airflow that you can create in your garden will always encourage there to be little to no mildews, and it will truly allow your plant to not have any real problems that can grow on it because there's nowhere that the air is not flowing. The one con, if there are any to it, is going to be if it's not done correctly, it can cause hermaphrodite traits. As we all know, hermaphrodite traits, we don't want seeds in our product. It can heavily confuse your plants, and that's just not what we want. The goal here is to follow all the steps, and we can end up with a beautiful room that is just packed full of extremely large nugs. So now that we've gone over the why and the pros and the cons, let's dive into all of our environmentals. Our temps, our humidity, our CO2, our lighting, our watering. How do each of these apply to the schwazz? For our temperatures, we want to be between 78 and 84 degrees with our sweet spot being at 80. For our humidities, anywhere from 45 to 60% humidity is going to be just fine, of course, with our sweet spot at 55. 55% is the optimum humidity level for the plants throughout the entire life cycle. Schwazzing, of course, fits right in with that. Our CO2, being that it is day one of flower, we like to ease our plants into CO2 without giving them too much. So it's anywhere between 900 and 1100 parts per million, with 1000 parts per million truly being the sweet spot. That CO2, as you know, acts as an all-you-can-eat buffet for the plants and really helps them repair themselves after a schwazz and all the shocking that they get done. They bounce back from it much, much quicker. Our lighting, as you know, in a flower room, with how we grow, we use dual-ended high-pressure sodium bulbs. Now, this is going to be extremely advantageous for us in flowering, but most importantly, to adjust the plant to the bulb it's going to finish under while it's still in veg. So for our sake, we don't want to shock the plants any more than we're going to have to. So on a day one schwazz, you're already going to shock the plant incredibly. So for one less shocking to go on, put them under a high pressure sodium bulb while they're still in veg. And while they're still getting the 18 hours a day of sunlight, they begin to adjust the bulb they're going to finish under while they're still in veg but moving to flower. And so if you're able to achieve this in veg, it will be very key for your plant's ability to bounce back while it's in flower from a schwazz. And lastly, our watering. As you know, growing is where science meets art. There's not a perfect way to write an SOP around this other than to kind of put a little feel into it, a little bit of good energy into it. So for us, when it comes to watering, our plants are very key that they're not thirsty. If they're really thirsty and bone dry, it's important to go ahead and reschedule your schwazz and water your plants and get them taken care of. If they're overly saturated and they just got watered the day before, you want to push that schwazz to the next day. And the reason being is because when you schwazz your plants, In a lot of ways, it's like you just kind of cut yourself, okay? You're cutting your plants in multiple places. When you can follow a schwa with a feed packed full of micronutrients, like our day one flower feed or any of our transition feeds offer within Success Nutrients, you allow the plant to repair itself much quicker. So feeding is very key, that it's scheduled around a schwa. So our goal is to go ahead and to schwa our plants, and then water our plants within anywhere from 1 to 6 hours after the schwa. Truly allows them to repair themselves, no different than if you cut yourself and you put some Neosporin in your cut, as opposed to just leaving your cut. You're gonna have 2 entirely different heal times. And so for us, we wanna be more on the Neosporin side, let the plant focus on flowering much more than repairing itself. Let's dive into the supplies of what we're gonna need for supplies. As you can imagine, schwazing is an incredibly time-intensive, over-the-top project that a lot of people debate on whether you should even do it or not. It's not a debate here at our 3 Alight facilities whatsoever, but most importantly, you've got to bring a good attitude. It's gonna take a long time, might as well get it done with a good attitude. That's gonna be key. You wanna have a clean pair of gloves. You wanna have fresh scissors, some good scissors, sharp scissors. They don't need to be brand new, but you want them sharp. You want healthy plants. If your plants are looking like they're stressed out and you're about to flip them into flower to schwa them, they're only gonna get more stressed and more damaged. So if you can make sure your plants are always very healthy, it's gonna be extremely key. For adequate lighting, we have a couple situations here. One is you run your facility and it's a commercial facility, so you have certain rooms that are on at nighttime and certain rooms that are on during the day. Okay, so if you'd like to schwa one of your nighttime rooms during the day, that's just fine. It's gonna be okay. You just wanna make sure that A, your plants aren't too dry, but B, that everybody in there has green headlamps. As we know, the green light doesn't affect the photosynthesis period and truly simulates a moonlight. So that's gonna be okay. It's not gonna stress the plants. It's gonna make it harder for your workforce to get it completed in a timely manner, but that's okay. That's something that you have to do when you have multiple rooms going and multiple projects going at the same time. Sometimes you just need to schwa at night. Now for your day rooms, that's gonna be just fine, but that also comes back to the finishing piece here as well. You wanna have adequate eyewear. I've had a lot of good friends and people that I know well that haven't worn sunglasses in their grow, and over time that will definitely take a toll on your eyes. So do yourself a favor, don't be one of those guys and wear good sunglasses while you're in the garden. Talking about supplies, we talked about the why for it, we talked about all the environments as we're doing it. I think it's time to bring a plan out. Let's get to schwazing, huh? All right, everybody, as you can see, we've returned from the break. We do have our nice, big, healthy plant. We also have a good attitude. Like I said, it's key. This is gonna take a minute. We have our gloves on. We've got sharp scissors. We have adequate lighting, nice studio lighting in here. And I don't have my proper eyewear on simply because I'm in a studio. If I was in the garden, I would absolutely have my shades on. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I do like to start with the largest leaves and then kind of work my way down. I also am not too worried about where the leaves go after I cut it, simply because there is so much work to do and so many leaves to cut off that I really like to focus on that with a good cleanup as opposed to really trying to keep track of where it goes every time. Another thing you can notice too, right here, I try and cut this leaf as close as possible without damaging this new flower site, and also leaving a nice big neck on the plant. And what I mean by neck is I can show you another one where I did it wrong. So right there, boom. You see how I left this extra space there? It's very important to not do that, okay? There we go. Let's cut it nice and close, all right? And another thing to keep in mind as you are schwazing on day one is to always make sure that any node that starts on the plant does go up past halfway. If it doesn't, you can go ahead and remove that node. And what I mean by that is this plant right here, this branch, if I follow it all the way up, it goes all the way to the top, okay? That is the branch that I'm going to leave. However, this little node down here at the bottom, this guy right here, okay? That right there, it's honestly so small and it's so low in comparison to the height of the plant that we want to go ahead and just remove this plant, this one entirely. Totally fine. See how this node right here, for example, see this branch, it goes all the way down and it doesn't quite make it to halfway. In fact, it's probably 1/3 of the plant. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this node from the base, right there. Off she goes. This one as well, see another great example. just go ahead and clean those out. What that really does is it allows optimum light penetration throughout the entire canopy, but also allows for optimum airflow. We got a lot of things will hang out towards the bottom of the plant, and it's important that the air can pass through it very well. The more small nodes you remove, the more energy gets to focus towards the top of the plant where it matters most and where we got the big nugs. So that's what we're going for here. Most importantly as well, it will make it so your flowering process and your harvesting process is much faster. When you can schwazz a plant on day 1 and then again on day 20, typical flower rooms that we harvest only have big nugs. Rather than a whole bunch of leaves and larvae everywhere, just large big nugs, and that is the goal hands down. In addition, today I am schwazzing this plant solo. Make sure you have a good team around you to work on these plants. We typically team up in teams of 2 or 3 individuals per plant. Makes it much more time effective, and you got people you can talk to while you're getting the project done. As you can see as well, I'm cutting all of these plants at a flat angle, but most importantly, I'm not just ripping this leaf. If I rip this leaf off, it's going to have a much slower time to heal. Similar if a doctor just decided to rip one of your limbs off as opposed to surgically remove it. You're gonna have 2 entirely different heal times. One's gonna heal much faster than the other, and that's key. A lot of people like to just rip these leaves off. We're very against that here at 3 Alight, and we always encourage a good sharp pair of scissors to go ahead and do that cut with. And you might wonder too, how many leaves do I cut off? How do I know if a leaf should get cut off? The best way to answer that is whether the leaf has a stem or not on it, and we call it a neck. This right here, from where it comes off the plant to where the leaves begin, and actually the fingers of the leaf begin, this is what we're gonna just call a neck for lack of a better term here. And that right there is going to be the deciding factor of whether or not you should cut that leaf. So if you have to dig for the neck, like this one right here, okay? We're not gonna cut that one. That one's gonna go ahead and stay there. Leave it alone. But if it's big and it's in the way, like any of these ones, okay, we're gonna go ahead and cut those ones. Those are the key ones to remove. If it's not casting shade on the flower sites below it, there's no reason to remove that leaf. So. Another thing to keep in mind as well when we're schwazzing, okay, is that certain strains will always react differently than other strains when it comes to a schwazz. So if it's a new strain that we're getting, and it could be, a new a Mandarin cookies cut or a new cut that just recently got bred, we like to take that strain and we just like to big leaf it. What I mean by big leaf it is we only take the large leaves. We don't take some of these smaller leaves. For example, this right here is a big leaf. We would definitely remove that leaf, okay? But some of these other leaves down here, like this one right here, that would go ahead and stay if this was an exotic strain and we weren't quite sure how it was gonna react to this. So really depends as well on the genetic that we're working with how aggressive we schwazz it or how light we schwazz it. But the ultimate goal is to create that light penetration and that airflow and refocus that plant's energy. You can achieve that when you just big leaf the plant. When you veg your plants right, typically you've created a lot of tops already. So rather than having to reach all the way in there and get in there with my scissors, a lot of times I'll meet them in the middle. So I'll pull her towards me just enough, not to where she's stressing, but also to where I have a much closer look at her, as well as a closer cut to create. And we also want to accommodate the plant as well. We don't want to pull on her too much. As you can see, I'm spinning this plant quite a bit, and that's definitely allowing me to continue to get a different vision of the plant. And once I can see all the way through the plant and all the big leaves are gone, my schwazz is complete. We're getting pretty close. Thanks for your patience. You'll also notice that some of these larger branches that might be hanging out quite a bit, once you remove all that excess weight from them with the large leaves, they tend to stand up a lot straighter. Makes it so you don't have to support your plants quite as early in flowering because you're removing a lot of the excess weight from the branches that honestly doesn't even need to be there. So that's a key part. And furthermore, when we are removing these leaves are in a lot of ways, we call them sugar factories. They're packed full of micronutrients that the flower would typically use to then uptake and use its energy from here to create a flower and just further it along its growing process. We replace that in the feed line, which is why it's very key to have a lot of micronutrients in the feed following a schwas, specifically boron and a few other key parts there to really help it repair itself. Because it's not going to have these leaves anymore for it to pull energy from. All right, we're getting down to the last 15–20% of this plant, and that's when you just got to be patient and keep finding those extra leaves, keep spinning her, and then once you've spun her a few times and you're not really seeing anything new, that's when it's good to go ahead and put her back in with the group and grab the next plant to schwas. She's looking good. Getting down to that last 10% now. We'll get rid of these big leaves and then we will call her good. As you can see, there's a lot more visibility through this canopy here, and that is extremely key because if you can see through it, the light can then penetrate through it as well, and most importantly, the air can flow very freely through her. We don't have to worry about powdery mildew, bud rot, and a lot of other things that can come from the plants being too clammed up. This really frees them open. It's a key part of the puzzle, guys. We'll go ahead and get a few more of these, but for the most part, she is good to go. We've gotten all the big leaves off of her. There are a handful of other leaves on this plant that are a little bit smaller, and that's going to be just fine. We want to get the big shaders out of the way. And by big shaders, I'm talking about some of these guys, the larger ones. Clean up the middle a little bit. The middle, as you know, can be some of the densest parts of the plant. So we want to free that up. We want to open them up. Because if you free it up, you can allow the most airflow to go there. You can also allow the largest amount of photosynthesis to accumulate there, which will be some of your largest nugs. As we all know, that's a trophy that we're all going for. We want big nugs on these plants, and she's definitely going to do that for us. Look forward to seeing her at the end of her flower cycle. Just a couple more leaves, and as you can imagine too, you can always turn it and see another one, and turn it and see another one, and turn it and see another one. We're not looking for perfection here. We're just looking for the majority of our large span leaves have been removed. And I think that this plant is ready to go now. We're good to go. Next, what do I do with all this waste I just made? Just made a big mess. I wasn't too worried about it while it was on the plant, while we were doing this project, but now that I'm complete, we want to make sure that all this is logged very well with our state metric system, so that way there's no concerns about where this extra plant waste could have gone. So we'll clean this up, put it in a bucket, we'll log it in our waste records, and then we'll go from there. She will go back to a room where she has all of her friends hanging out, and then we'll show you how that room needs to look. Like I said, the key part of the puzzle is going to be, can I see through the canopy of the plant? If you would have asked me that when we started this, there's no way I could have seen through the canopy. But now that we were able to schwas it and open her up, we can now see through the canopy of the plant. Therefore, check mark, she's good to go.